All right, welcome back to Virtual School Assembly. Today our guest is David Rendall. During the last 15 years, David Rendall has spoken to audiences on every inhabited continent. Prior to becoming a speaker, he was a leadership professor and a stand-up comedian. He's also managed nonprofit enterprises that provided employment for people with disabilities. In between presentations, David has written 4 books and he competes in ultramarathons and Ironman triathlons. David has a Doctor of Management degree in organizational leadership, as well as a graduate degree in psychology. Welcome to the show, David.
Thank you. So today I want to talk to you about the freak factor. The freak factor is a personal story that starts with my life in school. I was always in trouble in school because I couldn't sit still, be quiet, and do what I was told. Teachers called me obnoxious, rebellious, inappropriate, immature, told me I had no self-discipline and no self-control. And if I couldn't fix those things, I was going to end up homeless and living in a van down by the river. Sooner or later, they'd kick me out of class and they'd send me to the principal's office. I was in 3rd grade, so I was 8 years old. I got sent to the principal's office. He sat me down on his lap, which seems questionable now looking back on it. And he told me that there's 3 kinds of bad people in this world. And I'm like, wow, this story doesn't even have good people in it. He said there's bad people, really bad people, and people who are too far gone. He told me I was a really bad kid on the verge of being too far gone if I couldn't learn to sit still, be quiet, and do what I was told. Now, I think he genuinely cared about me. He wanted me to succeed, but he was teaching me what his parents and his teachers and his employers had taught him, that he got to fix weaknesses in order to be successful. He was worried about my future if I couldn't learn to sit still, be quiet, and do what I was told. And because he was worried about my future, because my parents were worried about my future, they called me motor mouth. They were constantly reminding me that my biggest problem in life is that I needed to be quiet, because all of the adults in my life were telling me something was wrong with me. I assumed they must be right and that I needed to fix who I was in order to be successful. I'm not the only one who had trouble in school. Ken Robinson says many highly talented, brilliant, creative people think they're not, because the thing they were good at school wasn't valued or was actually stigmatized. And like I said, it's not just at school, it's at home. My parents called me motor mouth. Like I said, I was getting punished at home for what I got punished at school for. People oftentimes at work feel like their strengths aren't seen as well. Many highly talented, brilliant, creative people think they're not, because the thing they were good at, their strength, wasn't valued, it was ignored or denied, or it was actually stigmatized. We tell people that the best thing about them is actually the worst thing about them. And I realized that's exactly what happened to me, because I'm a professional speaker now. I get paid to stand up, not to sit down. I get paid to talk, not to be quiet. I get paid to run my own business, not to do what other people tell me to do. Every one of my weaknesses was a weakness. I'm not telling you that you don't have weaknesses, that your teachers are wrong if they tell you have a weakness, that your parents are wrong if they tell you have a weakness. I'm not arguing that we don't have weaknesses, but every weakness had a corresponding strength. The worst things about me were connected to the best things about me. And I realized that was true for me. I started to wonder if it was true for other people. And I found all sorts of amazing examples. Let's take dyslexia. People with dyslexia struggle to read and struggle to write, so they struggle in school. And we've all been taught that if you struggle in school, you'll struggle in life. But they were doing a study of millionaires in the United Kingdom and discovered that 50% of the millionaires in their study had dyslexia, even though only 10% of people in the general population have dyslexia. 35% of the entrepreneurs in a United States study had dyslexia, even though only 10% of people in the general population have dyslexia. Ingvar Kamprad was the billionaire founder of IKEA. How many of you would like to be billionaires someday? And he had dyslexia. Richard Branson's the billionaire founder of the Virgin series of companies, and he has dyslexia. And they asked Richard Branson once, how has dyslexia affected your success? This is a disability. This is a problem that causes you to struggle and fail in school. And he said, strangely, I think my dyslexia has helped. What scientists are starting to realize is that people with dyslexia don't have broken brains, they have different brains. And the same brain that caused them to struggle at school causes them to succeed in life at a higher level than most other people ever will. There's a guy named Paul Orfalea, had dyslexia and ADHD, got kicked out of 4 different schools. Then he went to work for his dad and he got fired by his own dad. He'd get fired from other jobs on the first day. He couldn't keep a job even for an entire day. So he started his own business. He called it Kinko's, and then he sold it to FedEx for $2.4 billion. And he said this, he said, I think everyone should have dyslexia. Now that's something that I call appreciation, right? He doesn't just accept that he has weaknesses and they're connected to strength. He appreciates how the weakness and strength are related. Then you can't have one without the other. And he's not ashamed of his dyslexia. He's not ashamed of his ADHD. He recognizes that his weakness is also a strength, so much so that he wishes the rest of us had it as well. Jimmy Kimmel's a late night talk show host. He's a comedian. He has his own television show. He's one of the highest paid comedians in the United States and in the entire world. But when he was in 10th grade, he said he had a teacher named Mr. Mills, and Mr. Mills told him, you'll never amount to anything unless you stop screwing around. And then Jimmy Kimmel succeeded by going pro at screwing around, by becoming more childish, more silly, more ridiculous, more immature. Mr. Mills was trying to help, but he was teaching Jimmy what his parents and his teachers and his employers had taught him, that you have to fix weaknesses in order to be successful. But Jimmy Kimmel didn't fix the weakness. He recognized there was a corresponding strength. He turned up the volume on that strength instead of turning it down, and that's when he succeeded. Michael Phelps had ADHD, and his mom could have given him medicine to fix him and to keep him from being so hyperactive. But instead, she got him involved in athletics, and she got him involved in swimming. He became the greatest swimmer and the greatest Olympian of all time, because no coach ever sends a kid home from sports practice and says, oh my gosh, your kid just wouldn't stop running and running and running. He's so hyperactive. We don't call people hyperactive in sports. We call them dedicated. We call them determined. We call them disciplined. But they're not necessarily. They're a person whose weakness, hyperactivity, finds the perfect spot, finds the perfect fit. A few years ago, I did my first Ironman triathlon. It's a 2.4 mile swim, followed by a 112 mile bike ride, followed by a 26.2 mile run. You have to finish it all in 17 hours or you're disqualified from the race. And I did my first one in 16 and a half hours. It's not very impressive. I finished about the same time as an 83-year-old Catholic nun named Sister Madonna Booter, who did it in 16 hours and 35 minutes. But I finished one of the hardest single day races that exists. And when I finished, I got voicemail messages and text messages and Facebook messages from people praising me and rewarding me for finishing an Ironman, for being very, very, very active. Which is interesting, because my whole life I was very, very, very active. But when I was a child and I was at home, when I was a child and I was at school, I was very, very, very active. They called it hyperactive. They pathologized it as ADHD. They told me that I was broken and damaged and needed medicine to fix me, to make me better. I got criticized and punished my whole life because I couldn't sit still, be quiet, and do what I was told. Then I got even more active. I stopped not just sitting still, but standing still, moving nonstop for 16 hours and 30 minutes. And then some of the same people who criticized and punished me because I couldn't sit still praised me and rewarded me for being very, very, very active. Just like Jimmy Kimmel, not because I dialed it back, but because I turned it all the way up. Nobody thinks 16 hours and 30 minutes is just the right amount of activity in a day. Right? So I want to leave you with this. It's a quote by E.E. Cummings. He said, "We do not believe in ourselves until someone reveals that deep inside of us something is valuable, worth listening to, worthy of our trust, sacred to our touch." I do this presentation because I want to show you that deep inside of you something is valuable. Often the thing that we've been told is the most worthless thing about us. There was this lady named Tracy, and she came to one of my seminars and she bought my kids' book, Freak Factor for Kids, that I'd written, this illustrated children's book for younger kids, you know, the picture book with a short story in it. And she took it home to her son, and his name was Theo, and he was 10 years old, and he had ADHD, and he read the book, and he wrote me a note, and he ripped off this little piece of yellow legal pad paper, and he gave it to his mom, and she brought it back to me the next day. And he said, "Thank you, Mr. Rendall, for the book. It made me feel better about who I am." I was the first person who told Leo that deep inside of him something was valuable. The very thing, his ADHD, that he'd been told his whole life was the most worthless thing about him, that was worth listening to, that it was worthy of our trust, that it was sacred to our touch. And that's my message to you today. It's easy for people to see our weaknesses, our parents, our teachers. They care about us. They want us to succeed, but they think that fixing those weaknesses is what's going to make us successful. And oftentimes those people, and then we miss the strength that's connected to that weakness. So that's what I want you to hear today, and not just see that for yourself, but see that for the people around you. It's easy to tease other kids for their weaknesses. It's easier to make fun of other people because of their weaknesses. It's easy to reject people because of their differences. But we can be that person who sees in someone else something they don't even see in themselves. We can be a hero to someone who hasn't ever had anybody see through the outside weakness to that interior strength. We do not believe in ourselves until someone reveals that deep inside of us something is valuable. I didn't know that anything inside of me was valuable for a very, very long time until I discovered by accident. I want you to discover it by accident. I don't want the people around you to have to discover it by accident. And I want you to potentially be that person who not just sees it for yourself, but reveals it to other people. The freak factor is my concept that these weaknesses are strengths. And the one thing I want you to remember, easy to remember, is that what makes us weird also makes us wonderful. And what makes us weak also makes us strong. Thank you very much.
Thank you, David. Now, I have a few questions about your presentation, about your story. I'm interested about when you were a child and you discovered you had ADHD or you were getting in trouble, and school obviously must have been difficult for you, yet here we fast forward to today and you have advanced degrees, you got your doctorate, and you've even worked as a professor. What happened that enabled you to actually succeed in this area that would be perceived as a weakness?
Well, I discovered that I didn't like school. Part of my misbehavior, first of all, was because I was bored. It wasn't because I was dumb, right? And so people would say, there's something wrong with you, you're misbehaving. It wasn't their responsibility to capture my attention or to keep up with me. It was my job to sit around doing nothing, even though I understood the concept, even though there was nothing else for me to do, even though there was nothing else for me to learn. And so part of it was because just like in most situations, the situation wasn't tailored for me, right? And the lesson was, this isn't about you, everybody's together and we're in a classroom. And I didn't have the maturity at that age to be able to handle those things. But also I never ended up liking school, but I discovered that I love to learn. When I'm in charge, right? And that was one of those things, sit still, be quiet, do what you're told. When I was in control, when I was picking what I wanted to learn, when I was picking what I wanted to read, when I was picking what I wanted to study, when I saw the value, for me, I was very, very motivated. So that was another thing that was missing, is that I didn't see the value in most of what I was learning in school. I wasn't interested in it. I was assigned the classes. So for example, in college, once I picked a major, once I was selecting my classes, once I saw how what I was learning was naturally interesting to me, I studied psychology. I just found it fascinating. I found it really, really interesting. So I still didn't really like school. I didn't like sitting in class. I would work on my goals. I would write down lists of things to do. I would manage my calendar. I was like, I already read this in the textbook. Why are we talking about it again? I still didn't love that process. And even that changed a lot. Like I got my doctorate doing an online program. And so again, you strip out the classroom completely, and it's just your job to read the books and write the papers and do the work without having to interact in the classroom. So I think that was really it, getting that control over how I studied, what I studied, when I studied, and seeing that relationship between what I wanted to do. Because what I discovered, I was a very goal-oriented person. I just didn't really have any meaningful goals when I was in school.
Do you think that that desire to learn is a commonality with some of the people you mentioned earlier, Richard Branson and the founder of IKEA? Do you think that that is a continuous thread that goes through people who maybe struggled in school but ended up being really successful in life?
Well, I think there's so many different ways to learn, right? You can learn through experiences. You can learn through experimentation. And so I think we really think of learning as going to class, reading books, writing papers, taking tests. And traveling is a great way to learn. Trying to start your own business is a great way to learn. So I think, yes, I think anybody who's going to be successful has to be able to learn. I think too often, though, we've pushed that into defining learning as formal education and saying that someone who doesn't like formal education doesn't want to learn, when I don't think that's the case. It's that there's a very restrictive environment, and when somebody doesn't fit that environment, we think that something's wrong with them instead of saying maybe this isn't the right fit for them. The problem is there's not a lot of options when it comes to school, and so people kind of either fit or they don't, and then we make predictions about them. And one of the dangers there is sometimes that's self-fulfilling prophecy. If you tell someone long enough that they're going to be a failure, sometimes they stop trying to succeed. And so sometimes we make it true because we tell people, if you can't do this, then you won't be able to do anything else, and they believe it and they stop trying.
Great point. Now I have to ask this on behalf of my students, because I know they would ask, what's the deal with pink? Every show that you're on, every presentation you give, you're always wearing pink. What's the story there?
So I've been married for 25 years. My 25th anniversary is actually next week. And I have 3 daughters. They're 18, 16, and 13. Those are weird names, but we really like them. And living in a house with all women, and I've been only in the house with all women for the last 2 months because of the pandemic. Living with all women, I tell these jokes during my talks about how they're turning me into a woman, how they want me to trim my eyebrows, and they want to paint my nails, and they want me to use loofah sponges and exfoliating body washes and all these kinds of things. And so I started wearing a little bit of pink, and it was really a big hit with people. And then I got some pink shoes and then some pink pants. And then people sent me this pink shirt. I got pink glasses when I was going through the airport in Paris one time on my way to Barcelona. These are actually a hand-me-down from my daughters. They have wireless ones now, but I like these for my webinars, and they're pink. And so, I mean, even my tattoos are pink now. So my wedding ring is pink. So I always have pink on no matter what happens. Even if I don't have a shirt on, I always have pink on. So no one can ever say, Dave, you're not wearing pink. So it started just as a funny story, but it's also a way to be different. It's a way to express my individuality. And it also, because I own my own business, it causes people to ask that question. It causes people to be interested in what I'm doing, which is marketing, which is advertising. And so again, that's a great lesson. When I was in school, I'd get in trouble for being disruptive, and the teacher would say, well, Dave, I guess you just want to be the center of attention, don't you? And I did. I wanted to be the center of attention. And that's what you are when you're a professional speaker. You're on the stage. There's a spotlight on you. You're the center of attention. I was comfortable being the center of attention, and pink is one of the ways I make myself the center of attention, because my business is based on getting people's attention. If I didn't get your attention, we wouldn't be doing this right now. If I was just another person who looked the same and talked the same and acted the same and spoke about the same things. And so pink is a way to stand out, do something fun, do something interesting, and challenge people's perspective of what normal is, what good is. What do men do? What don't men do? How do men dress? How don't men dress? And so it's just a way to challenge those things, but also a way to get people's attention and express who I am as a person.
All right. I have a selfish question for you now. As a author, former professor, ultramarathon runner myself, we have a few things in common. And one of my interests is in the impact that exercise has on the other aspects of our life. I wonder if you could comment on that. Does running or does participating in these endurance sports, do you think that affects your business life or the other things that you do and your other interests?
Yeah, when I finished my first marathon, I didn't so much go, yeah, look at me, I did a marathon, as much as what I thought was, if I can do that, I wonder what else I can do. If that's possible, something that seemed at that point so difficult, and so much beyond anything I'd ever done, if I can do that, I wonder what else I can do. So it increases my confidence, right? Increases my ability to see that I can take on challenges. And teaches you so many lessons just about the way life works, about setting goals, about working consistently towards those goals. But for me, it's also an expression of who I am, because I'm not exaggerating when I say I was hyperactive as a child. And so running is an expression of who I am. People are like, oh yeah, I gotta run because I gotta stay in shape. So I guess I gotta get outside. That's not me. I'm like, when do I get to exercise? When do I get to go outside? When's my next opportunity? I think it's a very positive way to stimulate my body with the chemicals that are the same chemicals that attract people to drugs and alcohol and other kinds of things. So yeah, I think it's hugely beneficial for a whole series of reasons. And again, it's part of who I am, and it gives me an opportunity to be myself. And it also just fulfills me. I mean, I got to do my first trail run for the first time in about a month and a half because the parks finally opened up in North Carolina. And I was just so happy being outside and being in the sunshine and running through the woods and getting that fresh air. It just made me feel alive in the way that, you know, sitting around and watching Netflix just doesn't.
Right. Now we are in the middle of the COVID-19 pandemic of 2020, and a lot of kids are finishing out their school year, learning from home. They're in a different situation. The world's kind of been turned upside down. And unfortunately, a lot of kids are really struggling right now because of that social isolation and other things.
Yeah.
Do you have any advice to kids who maybe feel like they're not able to do what they're normally able to do and they're kind of struggling at home? Just any advice for them in general?
Yeah, don't give up. Look for substitutes, right? So I was scheduled to do a 100-mile race and it got canceled. So I ran a 5-mile loop in my neighborhood 20 times. My daughter does 16 hours of gymnastics every single week, and she absolutely loves it. She goes 4 hours a night, 4 nights a week. And she's almost to the highest level of gymnastics you can be at, where you go to college and you're involved in Olympic gymnastics, and she can't do any of it. We don't have any of the equipment at home. The gym isn't open. And so she started running. She started designing workouts for her and her sister. They do workouts every morning. She just ran 20 miles with me, and she'd never run past 3 miles before. I'm doing this with you. I'm not sitting around going, I can't go speak on stages, so it doesn't matter. You know, my one daughter is a huge extrovert, so she's spending all her time on FaceTime with her friends and connecting with people that way. So don't just say, I can't do the thing I normally do, therefore I can't do anything. The question is, what are different ways that I can connect with people? If that's one of your things, what are different ways that I can achieve my goals? What are different ways that I can learn? What are different ways I can make progress towards whatever it is I'm trying to accomplish? Look for alternatives. Look for what you can do to move forward instead of focusing only on the things that you can't do. Because it's not that it's not frustrating. And if you're frustrated and upset, feel those feelings, be upset, be angry. I'm not telling you to deny that, but then ask that question. Even though, I mean, I have a daughter who's not graduating, who can't go to prom. It's her senior year. Her soccer season got canceled. She never got to play soccer. My other daughter can't get her driver's license because the DMV just won't open up for those kinds of things. Those are real frustrations. My daughter's going to have her 13th birthday and become a teenager and probably have nobody can come over to the house for her birthday party. So it's not that those things don't matter. I mean, I can't make a living. I can't make money. I can't travel and do my speeches. So it's not that it's not frustrating, but the question is, what can I do? How can I make progress? What are and how can I even add some new goals or do something I never would have thought to do because I have this opportunity at home that I wouldn't have had otherwise.
Great advice. Well, thanks for your time today, David. If kids want to learn more about you and what you're doing, where should they go?
Yeah, so my website is drendall.com. So D as in David, and then my last name is Rendall, Rendall. So drendall.com, or if you Google David Rendall or the Freak Factor, I'm one of the first things that comes up on Google. And I have videos of my presentations and my books. I have assessments, links to my books and things like that. Everything's on my website, drendall.com, as well as links to my Instagram and my YouTube channels and all those kinds of things.
Awesome.